We have another question from Elise. Mr. Hinton, your book is so powerful to read. What was it like to write it? What was it like? What was that journey like for you to write the book?
Well, let me first say that 30 years I was not allowed to keep a journal. And I have to say this, by the grace of God, he kept my mind intact so I could remember. What a lot of people don't know, if you was writing me, whether you my family or whoever, I only had 7 days to read that letter, and then the letter would have to be destroyed. If you sent me a book, I had 7 days to read that book. After 7 days, they would come and take that book, and that book would have to be destroyed. And so every time you would write something and try to put dates or whatever, they would come shake down and say, this is over 7 days, and they would throw it away. And so I had to come home and write a book from memories. And the justice system part was easy because Mr. Stevens and them had kept records of all the court procedures. And so that part was easy. But for me to remember names and date and stuff, and I just really took my time. And to be honest with you, it was the hardest thing I had to do. Because once I got out and I read letters that my mom had wrote one of my attorneys, and how how my mom was begging this attorney to stay on the case and get her baby out of prison. And I learned from boxes that the lawyer had that my mom was taking her little Social Security check and giving him.
Yes, sir.
And when I learned that, I had to. I had to stop writing the book for about a week or two. Because I could it didn't surprise me that my mother was fighting for me. On the outside. And she was taking her little Social Security check. Trying to pay a lawyer to stay on my case and get her baby home. And it didn't surprise me because I know what type of mother I had.
You had.
But it just hurted me as her son to know that my mom was begging. Somebody please help my baby.
Yes, sir.
And so when I got to the point where I was writing about her, I just couldn't go any further for a while, and I had to sit it down.
Yes, sir.
I had to literally pray for strength because my mother is all I ever had.
Yes, sir.
And my mom was the world to me. And she wasn't ashamed of me. My mother was proud of me. And I wrote this book in honor of my mother, to show the world that my mother brought me up right.
Yes, sir.
And I wanted the world to see that my mother gave me enough love to last a lifetime and to give to others.
Yes, sir.
And it was a hard book to write, but it was a book that I wanted people to read. And I wanted people to read it, and I want people to say, you know, this man went through hell, but somehow he was able to pick himself up.
Wow.
And if he can do it, I can do it.
Yes.
I wanted battered women to read this book.
Yes.
I am not my circumstances.
Yes.
And I wanted people to read about how we are so asphyxiated with race in this country.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted them to see that love is the only thing that will overcome hatred.
Yes.
And I didn't want nobody to hear about it. I wanted them to read it, and I wanted them to know who it was. And by writing about Henry, and I
Mm-hmm.
wanted people to say, you know, I can do better.
Yeah.
I want to be better.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many emails and how many letters
Mm-hmm.
that I
Mm-hmm.
get from people all over the country saying, I am a better person today because I read your book.
Yes.
Made me see that I was born white and privileged. And I
Mm-hmm.
used my privilege the way that I should have.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted people to realize that we are where we are today because when something was going on that was wrong, you didn't have the courage to stand up.
Yeah.
And I wanted young people more than anybody to realize that it's okay to forgive
Yes.
because forgiveness is
Yes.
not a sign of weakness, but forgiveness is a sign of strength.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many people is living in a world where they just can't bring themselves to forgive somebody that did something to them 10 years, 50 years.
Yeah.
My book is to let it go
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness is not about that other person. Forgiveness is about you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote this book hoping that I would cover every woman, every man of every race, that no matter how you feel about anything, you can read this book and you can find something in it that
Mm-hmm.
makes you laugh, makes
Yeah.
you cry,
Mm-hmm.
makes you say to yourself, after reading this book, I have decided to be a better human being.
Yeah.
Uh, that's the way I was brought up by my mom. And so
Mm-hmm.
uh, it was the hardest thing to do. But through faith and through
Yes.
trying to introduce my mother to the world, uh,
Mm-hmm.
it took about a year and a half, and I finally completed it. And I hope
It,
for those that read it, it touch them.
yes, sir. It makes me think about something that you said in the documentary for True Justice. It says, I can't hate people. I think I decided to forgive.
Yes,
I can't stay in a prison after I leave here.
absolutely.
And that really resounded with me because that hate is a prison that you walk around with every day, even
Absolutely.
though you think that you are free.
Absolutely. You know, it's I've had the privilege to come out
Mm-hmm.
of prison, and I met some movie stars. I met TV producers. I met Oprah Winfrey. I met
Mm-hmm.
people that perhaps I would have never met in my life. And I often tell people, had I came out with a revenge heart and a hatred heart, I wouldn't be able to enjoy the finer
That's
things in
right.
life. I wouldn't have never been
Mm-hmm.
able to enjoy my beloved Yankees baseball game. I wouldn't have been able to enjoy what a $15 hot dog tastes like.
Yeah, that's right.
I wouldn't have been able to enjoy playing basketball with George Clooney. I wouldn't have been able to
Mm.
enjoy going to England and visiting the Queen. I just want people to realize that when you have allowing your mind and heart to be full of hate, you are missing out on life. And
Mm.
nothing in this world is worth you missing out on having a good life. And if anything, if nothing else, I want people to realize truly the only way you can ever be free is that you have to forgive.
That's right.
And I wanted to be free.
Now I see you got that Auburn shirt on. You free to go see those the War Eagle. War Eagle, I'm with you. I'm with you. That's something else
Okay,
we got in common, Mr.
that's
Hinton.
right.
War
Okay.
Eagle, I'm with you.
War
Now,
Eagle.
if I say that loud enough, my husband's going to have an issue because he's an Alabama fan.
Yes.
We have another question from Robert. He says, hello, Jamaica and Mr. Hinton. I had the privilege to visit Alabama last year, one of the phrases you kept using over and over again in your book is, "This is God's country." I found it was a sentiment that helped me to get through the book. It evoked forgiveness. Can you speak more about what you meant by God's country?
Well, I wanted people to, I'm often asked, after what Alabama did to you, why do you remain living in Alabama?
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be honest first with myself. I often tell people, yes, there were some white men got together and did this to me. But if I'm going to be truthful, some of the best people I ever met was white, and they live right here in Alabama.
Yeah.
And I have to be truthful that I want people to understand that regardless of what man think he owns, this world don't belong to him. This is God's creature. God created this world. And I have just as much right to live here in Alabama as anyone else. Mm-hmm. And I chose to come back because my mother, for the first time in her life, had her own house built. And when I came back, it was just about falling down. And through generous donation, I was able to rebuild this house. Yeah. And I built it in a way that I was hoping that my mom would be proud. But I just wanted people to know that this is God's country. Yeah. And you have a right to be wherever you want to be. You may not be welcome, but really understand this. You have a God-given right to live wherever you want to live. And don't never allow anyone to take that from you, because once you do, you're allowing people to take your freedom from you. Yeah. And you're giving up too much power to the person that is trying to run you away from where you want to live. And so that's really what I meant about this is God's country.
Yes. All right, we have one last question, Mr. Hinton. This is from Chavoyer Brown. Mr. Hinton, first of all, thank you. I am a Black male English teacher. In my previous school district, I was the only Black male teacher in the entire school district. Now I'm in a new school district. Often, I feel like my colleagues aren't mindful of my voice, and I feel like it's because I'm a Black man. How can I continue to show them love, forgiveness, but also find purpose in my words as it pertains to the educational experiences of our students? Thank you, Mr. Brown.
What I would say to Mr. Brown is never stop being who you are. You know, they may not accept him, they may not respect him in a way, but you always respect the others. You know, I'm reminded of what my mother told me. She said, you are not responsible for how others treat you, but you are responsible for how you treat others. And so I would tell Mr. Brown, continue to treat them as human beings, continue to love them even though they don't want it, because he is not responsible for how they accept him or treat him. I would have him to believe that one day, I truly believe that they will come down and accept his love. They will respect him as who he is as a teacher. They will respect him as a Black man. But don't let that stop you from being who you are. Never be anything other than who you are. You can't, as much as you might want to change and say, well, okay, if I could do this, I often tell people, I wouldn't change what happened to me for anything. I learned from it, I grew from it, and I would tell Mr. Brown to learn from it. I would tell Mr. Brown, it gives him a reason now to go home and pray even harder. And I promise you, if anything, nothing else, take it to God in prayer and leave it there. I promise you, sun will shine for Mr. Brown and all the
That leads me to the last one. So many people are talking about in the chat about all of the things that are going on, and you kind of touched about it a little bit. What gives you hope in all of the things that we're seeing today? Racism, prejudice, discrimination, people and how they treat each other. What brings you hope in these times?
Well, let me say that you and I being from Alabama,
Mm-hmm.
we know the history of Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And what gives me hope is the fact that you and I once lived in this state. We could
Yes.
even vote.
Mm-hmm.
You and I lived in a state that you and I could even ride the front of the bus. We once lived in a state that we couldn't even go in the front of a restaurant.
Yes.
We lived in a state where everything, you had your colored water fountain.
Mm-hmm.
But look what change brought. Look what margin, look what keep praying brought.
Yes.
So those are the things that gives me hope that at one time we went through something, but we kept on fighting for what we believe in.
Mm-hmm.
My advice to young people, I'm not with this looting, I'm not with this burning.
Yeah.
I'm with
Mm-hmm.
you making a difference and believing that walking the street day and night will make a change. But I promise you this, if you truly want to make a change, make that change at the voting booth. Mm-hmm. Don't let your voting be in vain. Yes. Vote, make changes there. Never stop believing that tomorrow will be another day, and with tomorrow come changes. And realize that it won't come overnight. Sometimes you have to endure a season, but I promise you nothing ever stays the same. You're talking to a man who spent 30 years, who sometimes wanted to give up, but I know me. I know, as the songwriter said, there's a change coming. Yes. Believe that that change is going to come. And you have to believe that what you're doing it not so much for yourself, but you're doing it for the next generation. Yes. They won't have to go through what you're doing. So I would tell all the people that is marching for change and action for justice and action for fair treatment, you have a right to all of that. Don't let anyone determine that you can't do this, but do it in a way that you don't give your enemy any gasoline to put on you.
Yes. Now, as we say in my church, now that's a word, Mr. Hinton. That's a word. Don't give the enemy any gas. Yeah. That's right.